Hello, America. Welcome to the Glenn Beck program. As I have been telling you for the last few days, what you're seeing on television is a table read. And a table read is when somebody writes a script and it's the first time that all of the actors get together and they read it together for the first time. This has all been scripted. They already have all the testimony from behind closed doors. Now it's being read to you for the first time, eventually a movie. And we found out today that in this Democratic movie, the star as the main villain seems to be shaping up, I guess, in the Democrats' mind, as Rudy Giuliani. Rudy Giuliani joins us by phone for the program today. Mr. Giuliani, how are you, sir?
I'm really good, Glenn. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for being on the program. I want to run through just a few things here that went through the testimony and then talk to you about bigger concepts on this. But did you ever indicate to Volker, Taylor, Sondland, or anyone else that the aid was conditional?
I never actually discussed the aid with them, Glenn.
Okay.
The reality is that whole issue of military aid didn't come up until after I had finished the assignment they gave me. I never discussed military aid with them. And, of course, I can't tell you what I discussed with the president. He's my client.
Right.
But I had no involvement at all in the issue of military aid, and I believe that that is a complete non-issue.
Okay.
If you know President Trump, and I know him for 38 years, that issue is something that arises with every country. He holds up aid, and he makes them justify it.
Right.
And with a country like Ukraine, where a lot of the aid is stolen, he would have been irresponsible not holding it up.
Well, he said
Obama used to hold it up.
Right. They said that today in the testimony, Sondland actually said that the president said, I don't want anything to do with Ukraine back in May. They're corrupt. I don't want anything to do with them. But the corruption they're trying to say is bogus, but you're the one who brought him up to speed on the corruption, and that's all a conspiracy theory according to the media and the Democrats. What changed his mind from the time in May to the phone call that allowed him to get on the phone call?
That's very interesting. First of all, his knowledge of Ukrainian corruption is the same knowledge any of us would get if we got a CIA briefing. Mm-hmm. I mean, the first time I went to Ukraine was in the early 2000s, and I got a briefing from Secretary Powell. I got a briefing from the CIA, and without exaggerating, I would say the briefing was just about everybody's corrupt.
Right.
And in fact, I was given the name of only one person that I could really trust. That poor man was Viktor Yushchenko. I've forgotten the pronunciation of his name. That was the man who was poisoned by the Russians.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember.
He was listed as the one man you could trust. So, I mean, the idea that the president finds Ukraine one of the most corrupt countries on earth is only verified by the Justice Department, right. Where they have the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act countries, where Ukraine is among the worst. So, but what happened here is, in November of 2018, this is before Biden was running for president.
Right.
It's while Mueller was still investigating.
Right.
A former colleague of mine called me with information. The information was, just to shorten it a bit, that you won't believe it, there's a lot of so-called collusion that went on in Ukraine, not in Russia. That what they say was going on in Russia looks like it was really going on in Ukraine. It included not just the server issue and the hiding of the server. It included specific information that was developed by the Ukrainians, that was turned over to the Democratic National Committee, and that was used to try to stop Trump from getting elected, used in mid-2016. Mm-hmm. It also included very strong evidence that a lot of the Steele dossier was produced in Ukraine, in Kiev, and also things I didn't know, like Glenn Simpson spent a fair amount of time there during the time that the dossier was being written, and that the document that reopened the Manafort investigation went through the Glenn Simpson company, and that there were real questions about whether it wasn't a fraud, and also no question at all that it had been improperly used and leaked to the press in May of 2016 so the New York Times could write a story basically saying Trump has crooked campaign manager.
Correct.
So when I got all that evidence as a defense lawyer, I said to myself, hallelujah, I now have what a defense lawyer always wants. I can go prove somebody else committed this crime.
Mm-hmm. All right, let me take you to the testimony today, and I want to come back to that through what you just said, through a front door, perhaps. The testimony today was that you were communicating with the Ukrainians without anybody's knowledge in the state. You were running a shadow foreign policy. So
right.
I take it by your laugh that that's not true. What?
No.
Oh,
no.
What?
I wasn't running a shadow.
Right. What was your mandate? What did the president ask you to do in Ukraine? What were you doing?
Well, we got two parts. Glenn, we have two parts to what I did. Part one was my investigation as a defense lawyer to gather exculpatory evidence that would help to make him innocent. So remember, this began while Mueller was still investigating Russian collusion. Mm-hmm. November 2018. It happened to be at a very sensitive time. They were seeking answers from us on Russian collusion. Also, Mr. Weissman, who is a completely out of control, unethical prosecutor, who worked for Mueller, had been questioning Manafort in what I consider to be a horrific manner. He had him in solitary confinement. He would take him out every couple of days, and he would say to him, "Weren't you the link between Trump and the Russians?" And then when he said no, he put him back in solitary confinement, basically telling Manafort, if you'd like to, stop being locked up for 23 hours a day, just lie to me. So I knew they were hot and heavy on this Russian collusion thing, even though I knew 100% it was false. So when I got this evidence about Ukrainian collusion, in which they mentioned that Joe Biden was involved in developing some of the collusion, I jumped on it. And I started to find people in Ukraine that were willing to come over and to talk to me about it. People who told me that they had been blocked from coming here by the American embassy, specifically by the ambassador, Yovanovitch, because she and her embassy were involved in collecting the dirty information. There was a particular FBI agent named Greenaway who they said was very involved in collecting not only the dirty information, but fraudulent information on Manafort. She had since gone to work for George Soros, which gave it its own interesting flavor.
And she was working at the Anti-Corruption Bureau, was she not?
She was working at what the Anti-Corruption Bureau is a contradiction.
Yeah,
the Anti-Corruption Bureau was set up by George Kent, who was one of the witnesses here.
Yep.
I mean, when I was looking at him, I was like in shock that he's still at the State Department. But George Kent set up this bureau. They took all the corruption cases away from the prosecutor general. They gave it to the Anti-Corruption Bureau, and they got rid of all the cases that offended Soros, and they included all the cases against Soros's enemies. One of the first cases they dismissed was a case in which his NGO, Antac, was supposed to have embezzled a lot of money, but not only that, collected dirty information on Republicans to be transmitted, gotten by Ukrainians, to be transmitted to this woman, Alexandra Chalupa, and other people who work for the Democratic National Committee. So the first case that Lutsenko tanked was that case at the request of the ambassador.
So, Rudy, there are so many people involved in this, and one of them is the whistleblower, and I think it's why they won't let the whistleblower be verified by anyone. But do you know the name of the whistleblower? And if it's Eric Caramella, just cough.
Well, I won't say if I do or I don't know the name of the whistleblower.
Right. Okay.
I don't know all the facts that I would like to know about the whistleblower, but what I do know is I no longer call him a whistleblower. When I write op-ed pieces or give lectures or talks on this, I refer to him as the anonymous informant.
Well, he is, if it is the guy, Eric Carmela, who we think it is, his fingerprints are all over a deep state, the throwing of the election, the stopping of prosecution. I mean, he's in the middle of almost all of this stuff. So if Eric Carmela is not the whistleblower, are you aware of Eric Carmela's role?
I don't know if I can comment on this.
Okay, I think...
I don't know
Let me
if
cough.
responsibly I can comment on this part of it. I can tell you, without being able to back this part up with facts right now, that I am entirely convinced that this whole episode is just, one chapter in at least a 3 or 4 chapter plan, which I guess was best described by Strzok to prevent him from being president. And then, should he become president, the insurance policy to remove him. And this Ukrainian stage also had a pre-election stage.
Yes.
Because the black ledger against Manafort, which turns out to be a fraud.
Well, wait, hang on before you say that. Before you say that,
delivered to the New York Times to hurt him during the election.
Right, and before you say that it's a fraud, I said that on the air today, and people said, "What? It put Manafort away." No, it didn't. It was never even used in the case against Manafort because it's so shoddy. They think that it is a total fraud. Am I right on that?
You're absolutely right. Yeah. Number one, you're absolutely right. Number two, it would be ridiculous not to use it. It was so damning. I mean, basically, It shows about $12 million in bribes that are signed off for by Manafort. And the reason it counts is this. The FBI had a case that was 2 years old on Manafort. Went back to 2014. The FBI had dismissed the case. This rogue FBI agent, Greenaway, who's now working for Soros, wanted to reopen it. In order to reopen it, they needed newly discovered evidence. And when this meeting took place in January of 2016 at the NSC, what the Obama people were asking the Ukrainians to do, said, go get us bad information on Manafort so we can reopen the investigation. And lo and behold, this black ledger shows up on the doorstep of a parliamentarian who then brings it to the prosecutor, but also doesn't forget to bring it to the New York Times first.
Right. And it
ends up being a big hit against Trump during the campaign, hopefully to take him out. And it doesn't work that way. So then they use it to prosecute Manafort.
And they use this document, and both the head of the anti-corruption and that parliamentarian both are convicted in a Ukrainian court, which no one in the media or any of these witnesses testifying have ever even heard of. Not even the ambassador to Ukraine had heard of that, apparently, according to their testimony. It seems...
Well, let me tell you one other fact that is infuriating. There are several prosecutors sitting in Kiev right now that want to come to the U.S. to testify to that. And they are not being given visas by our State Department.
Pompeo is the head of the State Department. President Trump is the president. All I can tell you is that for 3 or 4 years, that embassy has deliberately interfered with the ability to develop this story. I know that.
By not giving visas to Shokin and now 4 or 5 other parliamentarians who are ready, willing, and able to testify to this and go on television, testify before committees. They are direct evidence,
Rudy,
about the bribery, the collusion. The case is a massive pay-for-play, multi-million-dollar scheme and it is an absolute travesty of justice.
You give me their names, and I will go and bring the story. I
will give you their names.
Okay,
Absolutely.
great. We will go to Ukraine and get that.
Two of them today.
Okay.
And when you see that guy, Ambassador Taylor, on television,
yes,
he's the guy that could give them the visas. Somebody should have asked him, why are you holding back witnesses that have testimony that's totally contrary to yours?
Stand by. More with Rudy Giuliani in a minute. So, Rudy, who do we trust? First of all, you're being smeared by your relationship with two guys. We can't figure out what the relationship is other than you were their attorneys, and one of them introduced you to Shokin. Is there any more to it than that?
No. Actually, I found Shokin on my own. Okay. I got this information about Ukrainian criminality, corruption, Biden involvement in it, and even Biden bribery. Independent of them, I got it from a well-respected lawyer who had a source. I got all the information. I documented it. I began corroborating it, and then I needed help finding people in Ukraine. I could not go to the FBI because they didn't trust the FBI. I couldn't go to the Justice Department because a lawyer for them had brought the case to the Justice Department, and the Justice Department had turned it down. So they didn't trust the Justice Department. This is pre-Barr, before Barr was there. And I said to myself, the only way I'm going to get this passed, this double-standard town, where I'm going to get crucified if I say anything about Biden, is I better get corroboration. So I had these two clients, particularly Lev Parnas, who were familiar with Belarus and Ukraine and Poland. They spoke fluent Russian and Ukrainian. And I asked them if they would locate some of these people for me, which they did. They located actually two for me. Shokin, who was hard to get because he had been fired and he was hiding, and then a gentleman by the name of Lutsenko, who was the sitting prosecutor general. They helped to bring them over here. They didn't do any of the interviewing. They didn't do any of the investigating. They just facilitated my finding people. And after I did them, I went to John Solomon, and John had been working on it before me.
Yes.
And I said to John, I think you should take the lead, and we should put this all in the newspapers, because if I go to the Justice Department now, they're going to say Trump is forcing the Justice Department to do it.
Yeah.
Well, let's put the darn thing out, and let's see if any of these crooked media people will follow up on a proven case of bribery. And, of course, what we prove is the double standard is so bad that they are faced with absolute proof that Biden paid a bribe. They have a tape recording in which he says, I told the president of the Ukraine, you're not getting your $1 billion unless you fire the prosecutor.
Correct.
That's bribery. And that statement was made before the Council on Foreign Relations in December of 2015, and not one of those geniuses got shocked. But then all of a sudden, a few weeks ago, an article appears in a newspaper that says that this anonymous informant says that the president of the United States threatened the president of Ukraine with not getting his military money unless he investigated Biden. And all of a sudden, we have a worldwide story. We're on to impeachment, indictment, crucify Giuliani, crucify anybody else you want. The original Biden story got no coverage.
Well, what's interesting to me is...
And it turns out the Trump story is not true, and the Biden story is
right.
true.
It is.
And they didn't cover it, not even a whimper.
It's interesting to me that one is not in the national interest. Hey, we lost $7 billion in this country. There's some rumors of some really bad things going on. Stop looking into that. And the one that gets in trouble is the one that says, do look into that. It doesn't make any sense.
It's really odd.
Could I ask you, Lutsenko and Shokin, they're both, Lutsenko was the good guy. Joe Biden said it himself. Shokin was bad, so we replaced him with a really good guy. Well, now they're both bad. And it's because Lutsenko was going in, filed the documents 3 weeks before Biden came to town, And there was an investigation going on. Why do you trust these two, and why does everyone else on the planet not trust them?
Everybody else on the planet doesn't trust them because they're doing everything they can to protect Joe Biden. The reality is I don't trust either one of them. I never trusted any of my witnesses. I mean, who would trust any of these informants who testify? You do it based on corroboration. So what do we have? We have a group of witnesses. We have Shokin. We have Lutsenko. We have the number 2 guy in the Bureau, Konstantin Kulyuk. We have the head of the Special Prosecutor's Office, Kolonitsky. We have Andrei Teleshenko, who worked in the embassy, who can corroborate this.
So I've talked to many of these people, Rudy.
We have five witnesses. We also have a confession, and I have sitting in my hands unequivocal proof of a money laundering transaction that went from Ukraine to Latvia loan, Latvia to Cyprus loan, Cyprus to New York or Pennsylvania, with $3 million in laundered money going into the Biden account. That's a straight-out violation of 18 United States Code, money laundering. The only reason it's being not prosecuted is because the name Biden is on it.
What happened to the Southern District of New York?
I don't know what happened to the Southern District of New York. It's rumored they're investigating me for bribery. I like to know who I bribed. I don't bribe people. I've been doing this for 50 years of my life. I've never had a complaint. I think people understand that I have a very, very great passion for corruption, and I've probably uncovered some of the biggest crimes and disrupted some of the biggest crime organizations in our history. So they're letting it be leaked that I'm investigating for bribery. And my answer to them is, you go find anything I did like Joe Biden and start investigating Joe Biden for bribery. Then you can start investigating me for bribery.
Rudy
But
Giuliani,
I didn't hold back. I didn't offer a $1 billion loan guarantee to get rid of a prosecutor who was prosecuting my son. You know he did it. He admitted it. You've got to be a moron not to realize the corruption that was going on. And I'll give you one more fact.
Okay, I've got to take a break.
Okay,
I've got to take a break. When we come back,
I'll be right back.
Yes.
We'll come back with Point Man. We'll call it Point Man.
You got it. You need to hear the rest of that interview. It went on for another 15 minutes. We're out of time, but you can find it if you're a member of BlazeTV.com, BlazeTV.com/Glenn. Use the promo code Glenn, and you're going to save. Do it right now. You won't believe what else Rudy Giuliani had to say.